Well, welcome to the Leadership Lounge. It's great to have you here with us. We're here looking today with my friend Anna Hennell James, former CEO of Orwell Multi-Academy Trust. And she's joining me for the third of our short series on our next topic, which is all around challenging conversations. So really great to have you here, Anna. It's lovely for you to join us.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah, and we're here obviously going to talk about challenging conversations because they're the thing that I come across so often in coaching sessions, that where people find it really hard to have those challenging conversations. We were talking off air just before this, weren't we? Whether this is a UK thing, because we like to make sure we don't offend people or whatever it is, but it's those kind of conversations where you've got either raise someone's performance with them, or something maybe they've done that's unhelpful to others. And so, I thought you'd be great to chat this one through with. I know from our conversations that we've all had many of these challenging conversations, and you, as in your previous role as CEO, you had a number. So what is it about, do you think, having challenging conversations that the people in the UK find so hard?
It's really interesting because it's a national cultural thing, I think, and I think it's around, we don't like to offend people. I mean, generally, you like to go around and be nice to people, don't you? And it's not that in having a challenging conversation, you're not going to be nice, but there's a fear, I think, that you will offend the person or upset them. Yeah. And I think that also links into, then there's a fear that if I have offended them or upset them through having this conversation, they might not like me anymore. And I've got to carry on working with them because they're part of my team. So it's that kind of, you don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah, and what will our relationship be like afterwards? Yeah. So for you as a CEO, you said you've had a number of challenging conversations in your time. Have there been any that you've found hard, or have I got you on here because you're just amazing at it and they're going to learn so much from you?
I have had so many challenging conversations as a school leader and in the the CEO role, and it's not. I don't think it's something that ever comes naturally or easily, but definitely the more you do, the better at it I think you become, because you've had that opportunity to rehearse. But I think there are two definite kind of types of conversation, and if you are talking about someone's performance, that can be slightly easier because you can be talking about some very specific things, whereas if you are talking about someone's behaviour or something they've done, I think that can be harder, because to the person hearing that, that's more personal, because that's not about the job I do, that's about me as a person. And so that can feel to them like you are criticising them as a person rather than critiquing their performance perhaps. So I think behaviour-based ones are much more difficult. And I think those are ones where at times they haven't gone as well as I would have liked.
Right. So one of our things about our podcast is we try and be real and earthy. We also try and protect people. So I just wonder, are there any that you can talk a little about whilst maintaining the confidentiality and support of the people you dealt with, that will help our listeners kind of understand, even someone like yourself, who's CEO with all those years' experience, can find having those challenging conversations not only difficult, but also they don't necessarily go well
how you wanted.
Yeah. So did any, from your point of view, you look back and go, that didn't go well?
Yeah, I can think of one in particular where I was trying to raise with someone the impact that the comments that they made had on other members of the team. And they could be throwaway comments to that person, or they could be maybe slightly more, I suppose, directed. And that person probably wouldn't have minded people making comments like that to them, but was completely oblivious to the impact it had on the person to whom they were being directed, which then impacted on that colleague's performance and meant, so for example, if we were having a meeting trying to, plan something, address an issue, move it forward, you've now got a person who is feeling the impact of these comments being made, so is not performing at their best because they're feeling undermined. That then has an impact on the whole of the rest of the team because we're not all functioning at the level we need to be at because of some of these comments coming through.
So you had this conversation with this person, and remember this is under the heading of things didn't go so well. So again, whilst maintaining confidentiality, how did it not go well?
That person could not see that anything they said would have had an impact on anybody else. And they saw it very much in terms of, I haven't done anything wrong. And it wasn't I was saying, you have done this wrong. I was trying to raise awareness of when you say something like that,
and in that
the impact on the other person is this. But they took it very much like, I haven't done anything wrong. And then it became all about them. You're saying this to me, so you are not thinking about how I feel and about my, well-being and how I'm going to be able to perform in the next meeting, knowing that you are sat there thinking that I'm going to be saying something that you think I shouldn't be saying. So I won't be able to just contribute and say what I would normally say because you're going to be judging that I'm, not being fair or reasonable to somebody else. And it just all became about them, and it got very heightened and emotional on their part.
So if you're as old as me to remember Mrs. Merton, she used to call it a heated debate. So it got a bit as a bit of a heated debate, did it?
Yeah. And that's difficult because that's never what you go in with the intention of doing. You go in with the intention of being very objective and calm and explaining and giving the person a chance to respond. All that sort of structure to the conversation that you, when you've done some before, you have that experience to draw on. And I would always rehearse, have a sort of practice run in my head. And when you've done all that and it just goes boom, it's like, oh.
Didn't see that one coming.
Didn't see that one coming. And then it's like, how do I bring that down and respond to it? And sometimes, and on one of these occasions, I had to say, look, we need to end this conversation because it's clearly upsetting you. That wasn't my intention. This is not helping either of us. It's not helping resolve the issue. So we need to end the conversation now and then find a time when we can both come back to it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it just goes up and up and up. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that one, Anna, because, for many of our listeners and those who are watching on YouTube, you can go into it thinking you're the only one that gets these kind of challenging conversations wrong, and then it becomes a story you tell yourself going in, and particularly if you've had an experience like that, then shapes you for future conversations. And it's interesting, as I was reflecting in my coaching, there are perhaps two main reasons that people find it difficult going into these conversations. One is the story that they are telling themselves about the conversation. And it's interesting, you and I were talking beforehand again, we quite often use this phrase, I'm going to have a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
And of course, as soon as you put that word difficult in
straight
front
away
of
in your head, it's going to be really hard.
This is going to be difficult because I'm telling myself, even in the title I've given it, it's going to be difficult. Hence why we've called this podcast Challenging Conversations, because to bring challenge can be good. So I think sometimes it's the story people tell themselves about the conversation. Sometimes it's also about they just have never been taught, because actually you and I again were saying earlier that through all of our experience, nobody ever really taught us how to have a really effective, challenging conversation. So sometimes it's, how do I structure this conversation? How do I move through it? How do I introduce it? But there is a key thing for me, which is about the story you're telling yourself, because you can have brilliant structure to it, but if you're telling yourself it's going to be difficult, then the strategy isn't going to work.
It doesn't work, and you just, because you're going into it, that mindset of this is going to be really, really hard. And I'm not going to enjoy this.
So what do you, in all your experience, because obviously as a CEO you're leading leaders as well, and prior to that when you were head teacher you were leading leaders. So what did you find were some of the stories that people were kind of telling themselves about conversations they were going to have? Any particular patterns that you spotted?
I think it's the telling yourself it's going to be hard, telling yourself the person isn't going to like it and won't agree, telling yourself that actually maybe you shouldn't be having the conversation because although, I don't know, their performance might not be absolutely where you need it to be, their behaviour might be causing a few issues, might be that little bit of irritation, but actually, is it better to just suck that up than to risk it all, you know, going up in one of those boom moments, or that person then being so upset that your relationship with them is ruined. So there can be a lot of excuse making as to why you shouldn't be doing the conversation.
I wonder as well, there's this thing, isn't there, that when we make our mind aware of something, that's what sits in our mind. So it's interesting when you've said, oh, this could ruin a relationship, you're going in that with your mind, this could ruin a relationship. What your mind hears are the words ruin a relationship. A bit like when you tell a child, don't run, all they hear is the word run. So if we're going in telling ourselves this could ruin a relationship, that's the thing that sits at
the front of your mind.
Yeah, it's part of that process. The other thing I wondered as well is that often I think we see these conversations as one-off pass-fail moments. I'm either going to help this person understand their behaviour and improve, or it won't work and it will fail.
And things will be worse than they were before.
So we see it one way or the other. And I work with coaches, again, just helping them understand that if we see these conversations not as a one-off, but part of a journey of growth for ourselves, so that actually if we have this conversation, what worked well in that conversation? What didn't work quite so well? What can I learn from this about the way that I handled myself? What might I do differently, both in terms of where I have the conversation, in the environment that we're in, what I may start or finish with as part of that process?
And I think as you do more of that and you have more of those conversations, you're building up that experience bank that gives you that alternative messaging. So rather than going in with, this is going to be really hard, this might ruin the relationship, you can draw on that previous experience and go, well, we've done this before and there may have been a few boom moments, but actually we've overcome that, and you have that sense of how different people might respond. And if they're part of your team and you know them well, then you probably go into it with a sense of whether they're going to be somebody that might get very upset or get very angry, or I've had one person that just sat and said nothing.
Went into the complete freeze mode.
And
fight,
you know,
flight, or freeze.
I am not going to engage in this conversation at all. I will just sit here. You know, you say what you want to say, but don't expect me to respond.
And for those who are watching on video, you'll see the passive-aggressive arms folded bit that you were equally being shown in that conversation. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think the more we do it, we not only learn, even if I don't feel it goes so well in a meeting, there can be then the longitudinal bit that later on I can follow that up and we can redress some of the issues. You begin to learn that, okay, so if it doesn't go well, and even if they don't like it, I still need to do the bit that I do.
Yeah.
And I also think, particularly those though that are right at the beginning of this journey, maybe starting off in leadership, maybe having their first few conversations, just to see this not as this, it doesn't matter how this one goes, what matters is what I learn from it afterwards. It takes the pressure levels down for you for a start and becomes a journey that then any conversation becomes something you can learn and glean from and improve
it's part of your own development and improvement as a leader.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, the more of these I do, it's better because I'm practicing and I'm improving.
Yeah, and there becomes no good or bad experience, no good or bad conversations. It just becomes a conversation of which this bit worked well. This bit, if I was to do this again, next time I have a conversation, I'll consider these elements. Of course, remembering though that the next conversation is with a different person and they can respond very differently.
Be completely different.
So let's have a think a little bit about, for our listeners, about a structure that can help you. And what, again, I've learnt in running both training courses on this and one-to-one coaching is it starts before the meeting.
Yeah.
And so I've got four R's that build up in the whole process. And these four R's are: first is to realise the reason for your conversation. We're going to go through these ones together as we work them through. But yeah, what's my real reason and purpose for this conversation? Not just the topic, but what I really want is the outcome. The second is to recognise the issues, both the issues that you're experiencing, that they're experiencing, that might be coming into play. The third is reaction awareness. So you touched on that a little bit already. To be able to think through how are they likely to react and be prepared for that. And then the fourth one is to raise the issue using 4 Ps. So we're doing 4 Rs now, but in a moment we'll talk about the 4 Ps, a little structure that when you're actually having that conversation, how you raise it with them. So I wonder if we, Anna, could maybe take a typical conversation, maybe even the one you mentioned earlier, it's up to you what you choose, where we could just run through some of these and almost model it for those who, for our listeners. So realise the reason is our first one. What's the issue and what's really important about it? So what issue would you like us to
Well,
run
I
through?
think the one I've already talked around behaviour and making comments and the impact on other people in the team, because that affects the person who is at the receiving end of the comments, but also impacts the performance of the rest of the team.
Yeah. So how we work this through, and obviously I'm going to ask you the question, but for anybody thinking, what's the reason for my conversation, they ask this themselves. So if you're thinking about the way this member of staff is interacting in meetings, that it's negatively impacting the others, what is it that's important about this issue? So you're going to ask yourself this question several times. So what is it that's important in this?
It's the impact that it has on the team.
So the way this person is behaving is having an impact on the team that's not helpful. So what is it about this that's important? What is the outcome you want from this, either globally or for the individual? What is it that's important?
In that circumstance, it would be for the individual to be aware of the impact of their behaviour.
So you want the individual that's making these comments to be aware that their comments could negatively impact.
Yeah.
And so what is it about their awareness that's important?
They need to be self-aware and to be able to acknowledge that those comments, whilst they might not mind being at the receiving end of it, for other people has a negative impact.
And what is it that you would, as well as them being aware and considering that, what is it that you might like to be different in the future?
You want them to stop doing it.
So you want them to be aware of their behaviours, and is it about adjusting their behaviours then for the people that they're with?
Yes, so it's not around saying you are not allowed to make any comments. It's around saying when you are making your comments, you need to be aware and be thinking about the impact that they might have and maybe find an alternative way of putting it, or actually sometimes decide it's better not to say it.
So there's a sense then that what you're after is you want them to be aware and adjust. So there's 2 nice words there in this one, and that will drive therefore your conversation with them. What I really want as the outcome here is for them to understand they need to be aware and adjust how they respond accordingly. Yeah, great. So we've got 2 words there, but that's fine, or 3 if you use the word and as well. But there's a sense that now can drive you through the conversation. So hopefully the listeners have heard it's just about asking you, what is it that's about important? What is it I want as an outcome from this? And just narrow that down to 1 or 2 words. So the next part is to recognise the issue. So it's about thinking, what is it that I'm nervous about? So it's recognising your own issues. And what are my reasons for not having this conversation? So if you're thinking about this, Anna, and just almost going back in time, what is it that you need to kind of recognise is going on for you? What are your concerns?
Concern about how the person is going to receive that message you're giving, and their response and reaction, and also concern that how they're then going to interact with other team members. You know, are they going to be a bit like, well, you've clearly complained about me because she spoke to me and said, so there's that kind of thing. And there is always that slight anxiety of, much as you know an issue needs to be addressed, is having the conversation going to make it worse?
So this comes back to some of Steve Peters' work, just being, if you want to calm your own inner chimp, so that's the amygdala in your mind, it's your emotional centre, which Steve Peters calls your chimp, and he says the first thing is to kind of recognise your emotions. And the next thing is to remind yourself of times it's been okay. So this comes to that first one of just recognising, I am worried that they may react. I'm worried that it might make things worse. And just to, it's not necessarily you're going to do anything about it, it's just acknowledging those emotions. The other parts to recognise is just to recognise kind of your reason for that conversation versus your reason not to. So you've just touched a little on that one when you've said, look, my reason not to is I'm worried it might make the situation worse. But what is it for you then of recognising your reason for?
Because if you don't address an issue, for example, somebody making unhelpful comments, you are effectively condoning that behaviour, and the message that person is receiving is it's okay for me to behave like this because nobody's challenging it, nobody's saying anything about it. And that's not acceptable. As a leader, you are responsible for making sure that the team is as effective and high performing as they can be. And if you are allowing some behaviour which is not appropriate or helpful and you don't tackle it, then you're undermining what you are trying to achieve as a leader of that team.
So what we've got is recognising our emotions, recognising the reason for your conversation, as well as the reasons that you're thinking, well, maybe I don't have this conversation because it'll make it worse. And in this particular case, for your reason for it is, I need to address this, otherwise it's going to kind of affect the team and it's going to make things worse rather than better in terms of relationships. And then the kind of fourth part is just reflecting also on what might be the issues for them and recognising their issues. What might be at play for them. So again, whilst protecting confidentiality, if you're thinking about a typical conversation with someone where you're going to raise this kind of issue, what are the sort of issues you just recognise might be coming into play for them? You need to be aware of.
I think it's thinking about what experience that person may have had before in conversations. You know, what kind of leader have they worked with before who may have been quite aggressive in tackling something. So as soon as you say to them, I'd like to talk to you about this, they might immediately be feeling anxious because on a previous occasion that may have been a very unpleasant experience because of how it was handled. So you have to remember it's unlikely you are the first person to have had a conversation like this with that person, and how it was done before might influence how they react and respond to it. And naturally, some people are very defensive. And it's like, if you're going to sit and say something which I feel is criticising me, then the best form of a defence is attack. I'm going to come straight out back at you and comment on your behaviour or your performance. So it's just being mindful that whilst you might know people quite well and have a sense of how they might react, what you can't know is all their previous experiences, and you could say something which just triggers that memory or response in them that means actually they react in a completely unexpected way.
And so just thinking, this could be the sort of thing that means they might react, and you just begin to prepare. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment, just in terms of being able to think about our reactions, both for us and also for them. So that comes on to our third one, which is reaction awareness. And we've got a reaction in us and a reaction in them. So Steve Peters talks about our chimp. Well, they also have a chimp, and chimps are there to look out for threat. And if we perceive threats, then we'll respond in one of three ways. We've already mentioned that. You talked about the person that just froze in front of you. That's the freeze response. And we also have the fight and the flight if we perceive something as a threat. In our bodies and in theirs, and as we're preparing this, we know we're going to have this conversation. So part of our mind is already telling us, well, this could go a bit wrong. It might spoil a relationship. And so, our mind then might trigger the physiological response of just telling cortisol to be released in our body, which then will affect those fight, flight, and freeze kind of response. So if we are preparing for a meeting, lowering our cortisol can be quite important. So actually preparing ourselves with methods like going for a walk, having some peace and quiet, doing some perhaps mindfulness, being thankful for things, breathing exercises. If we note in our body that actually, I can feel the effects of cortisol, which will be increased heart rate, breathing increasing, this sense maybe of feeling slightly agitated stomach, even our bowels feeling a bit wobbly. All of those are a bit of reminders, there's a bit of cortisol in my system. So that's one thing, is just recognizing the physiology, and part of being aware and preparing for reactions is also thinking about how they might react, because as we raise something with them, they will spot, hang on, this now does feel a bit tricky. This isn't just a cup of tea with Anna. They're raising something that feels a bit threatening to me. And so they are likely to react in the methods we talked about. Fight, either normally verbally. I don't think I've had anybody try and fight me physically. Or they will just flight from it. They'll just want to run off in tears, or they'll just freeze and they'll look like the bunny before headlights. So one of the things I talk to coachees about is the method of Google yellow manning. So if you look on Google Maps, you have a little yellow man at the bottom right, and you can drag and drop the Google yellow man on part of the map, and you can then walk the map that you would be doing on the route you'll be taking. And so we can do the same thing in preparing for our meetings, thinking about how might this person react when I raise this with them, and thinking through, well, if they come back with some rather fighty responses, how might I respond, so that we visualize what it could look like, and therefore we visualize our response. So therefore when it does happen, it doesn't feel like a fresh thing we're having to suddenly think about. We've already thought through those processes. For it. So what about you with those things, Anna? Is there anything that either you have done a bit of Google yellow manning? Have you done any of this kind of preparing for a meeting in this way?
Yeah, I like to, if I know that I've got a challenging conversation to have and it needs to be done, and I need to make sure that I've covered all the points in it and that we don't get sidetracked, I like to almost rehearse that conversation. So I talk to a cushion.
You talk to a cushion?
Talk to a cushion.
Is this every time or just sometimes?
Just sometimes when it's like this, when I really want to make sure I feel like
it's going to be a really
tricky one. So I will.
Any particular cushion? Does it have a face on it?
No, just a cushion. But it's just sitting where I will sit, and I'll have thought about the layout of the room. And I think it's really important to not have the person you're talking to feel like they're pinned in. So they need a direct route to the door, so if it is all, if it all goes up, or they can get out easy. They haven't got shuffle past you and that sort of thing. Yeah,
let's just press pause on that one a moment, because we will come back to the cushion. I think the cushion is really important, but you've just mentioned something I think is really key. Thinking about your positioning, and just to reiterate, you've talked about allowing them to have space to exit to the door. Yeah. I guess in some ones you also need to make sure that you can also get out if you know this actually I'm a bit concerned about their behaviour. You've also talked about where you're sitting. So actually those who are watching us on video, we're kind of sitting at the 10 to 2 position, which is generally a counselling or coaching position, and it means you can look and you can turn away. And you don't want to be sat behind a desk with them on the other side of that great big physical barrier between you. It's that sort of thing. So it's like having the room set up and thinking about that before you even start. Great. But part of that preparation, part of that Google yellow manning is thinking, right, what would make the better, safer space less likely to escalate things? Great. Now let's go back to your cushion. So then interested in the cushion.
I would sit where I'm going to sit and put a cushion on the chair where the person is going to sit, and just rehearse that conversation with the cushion.
Excellent, good. So that's your way of doing it on those tricky ones where you actually personify a cushion and you just literally run through and think through, oh, actually, if they then respond by going, if they're a very rowdy cushion, then you think about how you respond back. Now, to reiterate to our listeners, you don't have to have a cushion, but if it's helpful, then great.
For me, it was something to look at, and whilst rehearsing those opening sentences, thank you for coming, have a seat, and then how you like lead into that conversation. So it was just something as a focal point really for me.
Yeah, and for me, what I tend to do is just think, those three type of responses. If they come back and they are, very flighty, very upset, very teary. What I'll do is hand them some tissues. So make sure I've got a box of tissues there, and it's visualising and preparing. And so I don't necessarily use a cushion, but I do think about the three responses I'm likely to get. I also think about the kind of person that I'm meeting. What do I know about them already? What do I know of some of their trigger words? What do I know really upsets them? So I'm just really careful about the language that I use there. Anything else you do to Google Yellow Man?
I think about previous encounters you may have had with them and how that went, or generally how they interact with other people. And I think if you know they can be a fairly heightened rapid response, so you get that real, torrent back at you, it's just reminding yourself that they'll do that, but it's not going to get any worse than you just sit and let them have their rant. And then when they've kind of run out of steam, then you can pick it up again. So it's just giving yourself that, I suppose, little checks and balances, like you say. This person is quite likely to get very teary, so I've got the tissues. I know this person may well just go boom. And when they go boom, I'm not going to try. There's no point in trying to interject. At that point, I'm going to let them just go with it. And then I will pick my moment to pick the conversation back up. Yeah,
great. And just hearing you there, I think I'm also mindful in terms of part of my prep. I just begin to think, what signs and signals am I looking out for, and being able also to note and acknowledge. So if I see them looking a bit frosty faced, I might not use the word "you look frosty faced," but I might say, it seems to me, or it looks to me like you might be feeling quite agitated. Do you need a moment? And just thinking through, what signs and signals with this person that I know am I likely to see? If I do see that, how will I respond? And it just means that when you come to it, your chimp is not getting quite so agitated because it's been there before.
You've prepped and preempted and had that little bit of rehearsal, so you're not sort of then in that moment of panic yourself. Of, now what do I do?
And just thinking about that, reminding yourself, in one sense, I wonder reminding yourself of times it's been okay. You touched on this earlier on in terms of I have had difficult conversations which help to calm the chimp. Kind of how important is that, do you think?
I think that's key, really, and it's hard when you haven't had many conversations because you don't have as much to draw on. But even if you've had a conversation, and I've had many that did not go well, there will still be things within that you can use to remind yourself. So, okay, the conversation may not have ended how I had hoped it would, but the way I started that conversation and basically let that person know why I'd asked them to come and see me, I did that bit really well. That bit was okay. It was after that it went a bit pear-shaped. So it's pulling out those different things and just holding on to that and reminding yourself that you can do this, that you have got some tools in your toolbox for it, that you have prepared for it. And actually, most importantly, there's a really good reason why I'm having this conversation, because the impact of not having it is not acceptable.
So we've got those several factors coming in, haven't we? Reminding ourselves of the reason, reminding ourselves of, actually, I've done these things before. If you've got a limited experience, reminding yourself of the bits that you have done. It brings us back again. Remind yourself this is just part of a journey of learning for me as well. So remind myself that, okay, there'll be some good bits I can pull out of this. And the other reminder I think I'd want to remind people of is to remind it's not all about you. It's not about us all the time. And we could be the most skilled negotiator, the most effective confrontationer. but if this person is in a certain space with a certain mindset, we can be brilliant and it will still possibly kick off a bit.
Yeah, it makes no difference.
Yeah, because they've got their own stuff going on.
Yeah.
And just to remind ourselves, it's not all about you, is also a good little reminder. So let's come to the fourth part. So we've done the realise the reason, which in your case in our test one was to...
aware and adjust.
Yeah, to be aware of, for them to be aware of their behaviours and adjust it. To recognise the issues, which for you were about recognising, oh yeah, I'm worried about the relationship, the impact they might then have on others, aware of your own feelings, aware of how they might respond as well. And then that reaction awareness, being aware for yourself what's going on, and also being aware how they might react.
Yeah, they might.
And to Google Yellow Man that.
Yeah.
It's also worth, I think it's probably just worth adding here that to be aware of our own body in the conversation as well. If we recognise our cortisol is rising because we're feeling the heart rate increase and our breathing change, and we're perhaps feeling our hands a bit wobbly or whatever, that's just giving us a little signal there's cortisol. So actually we're probably then going to be operating a little bit more in our amygdala rather than in our frontal lobe. So that may be an indication to us that we might need to press pause. And it's okay in a meeting, isn't it, to actually say, actually, should we just take a break? Let's just grab a tea, or actually I just need to nip to the loo and we'll pick up this conversation. To just recognise the signals our own body is giving to us in that moment as well, to just adjust and recognise the reactions that we might even be starting to do ourselves in the meeting. So then we come to the raise with 4 Ps. And so the 4 Ps, when we actually have this conversation, the first P is to pacify. And that's introducing things in a way that will calm their chimp, will reassure them that you're not a threat. So there are some really good phrases like, I'd really like to help you do well. And so they're hearing, even in that sentence, as you start it. And what that does is if you've asked them to have a meeting, their senses are probably already up, aren't they? So just to pacify, to help them realise that you want to work with them on this. The second P is to then introduce your purpose or your reason for the conversation. A key driver of that might be those like in this example that we've got with you, those 2 key words. But it will also be perhaps mentioning the actual thing. So in your case, that may well be around those purpose words of kind of just be aware and adjust, but also might be, I've noted in interactions that this is what's happening. And so then you come to the point, which is our third P. And this is not about being like a policeman's notebook, reeling off all their crimes, but it is about being specific.
It's really important that it is specific.
Yeah, time and date when you saw this happen. Because if we come in with anything too general, they'll go, no, when? Give me an example.
I think it's really important as well that you don't resort to, and other people have said. You have to own it yourself.
You do.
Because otherwise that takes you down another rabbit hole if you're not careful. Well, of course they'd say that, wouldn't they? Because they don't
just
like
out to get me.
that sort of thing. So you have to really own it.
Yeah.
And as you say, be specific and concise, but actually, be clear. You have seen and witnessed and experienced that behaviour, performance, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the fourth one is to partner with them. And this one I think is particularly good for those of us in the UK that maybe find it hard and I don't want to upset this person. But if we're partnering with them rather than doing it to them, where we're involving them in what do they think they could do to make this better. Now, not only does it make it easier for us, but it makes it easier for them, because quite often when you'll get a reaction is when people feel, I have no choice, I'm having this done to me. Whereas if they feel involved, it means they're not feeling threatened in that moment. So it's less traumatic for them as well. So let's go through each of these. And the first one is pacify. So Anna, how do you start conversations? Or if you were going to start this conversation with this colleague, how do you start it to reassure them and reduce that sense of threat?
I think it is partly that setup of the room, that when they come in, they feel comfortable, and it is the thanking them for coming. But I think fairly quickly you need to go on to why they're there. You don't want to sit and have a 10-minute chat about the weather and how's your dog and all that sort of stuff, because they're sat there going, you didn't invite me in here to talk about the weather, and you're keeping them waiting. So I think it is to let them settle, but pretty quickly directly come to, I've asked you to come and see me today because I want to talk about some of the behaviours I've seen in meetings which are impacting on other people in the team, and that is, meaning we're not all performing as well as we could, and I'd like to work with you to find a way that we can resolve this.
Yeah. So how you set the room up, not taking too long and getting to the point so they wonder what it is. And I think for me as well, what's really important, so Paul Dix wrote a book, When Adults Change, Everything Changes, and it's about managing behaviour of children, but I think it's equally useful in working with adults. And so that mixed with some of the Steve Peters work, when we start with, I'd really like to help you. And if we see they're agitated, to mention their agitation as well, but to start with saying, I'd really like to help you to make things better in the way that the team operates. Yeah. And so we're giving a sense of where it's going, but we're saying, I want to help you. I'm not here to tell you off. I'm not here to make you feel smaller. I'm here to help you. And where their senses are up, if those are some of the first words they hear, we're likely to get that response.
And I think if you're talking about, particularly when it's around behaviours, which people may believe is just inherently part of, that's just how I am.
Yeah.
You saying, I want to help you, is because they might be thinking, well, that's just me. How, that is me, and I am me, so what do you expect me to do about it? But giving that reassurance that you are going to help, they don't feel like they're on their own with it.
Yeah, good. So our second one is purpose. And that's about being really kind of clear on your reasons. So if we give your example from earlier, it's about them being aware and adjusting. So kind of, how would you utilise that? And are there ways that you've worked that core purpose into the conversation right at the start?
Yeah, it's about having those specific examples, and because you've already rehearsed in your head, you know where you want it to go. So it's almost like helping lead them to that. So maybe having some sort of prompts for them that, I have noticed in meetings you find it quite difficult to, wait your turn to speak, or you quite often you are talking over other people, and therefore it's not easy for that person's voice to be heard, and it will really help the team's performance if everybody's voice is heard. So I want to help you be aware.
Lovely. Yep.
When you're doing that.
Yeah.
Is there something I could do? And I have had people say to me, I didn't realise I did that. Or if you think I'm doing that in a meeting, could you just, give me a nudge or kick me under the table, or have a phrase that you use that will help me realise I'm doing it. So that's when it goes well.
Yeah. And I like the way in that description you've used that keyword aware again, because if it's simple and clear to us, e.g. aware and adjust, if we can drop those in, then that becomes a little mantra for them. If once they do grasp this needs to be, a changed behaviour, that's a little mantra for them to hang the peg off. It's the peg to hang things off in terms of, actually this is what my behaviour, I need to be more aware and adjust if I think this could affect somebody. So there's a sense where we're dropping in that awareness and adjust, and then you've just mentioned some there which are all around the point, the specifics. And you've mentioned I have noticed. Again, the experience that I find is I have noticed that you find it difficult to wait turn and you speak over people. For example, on Wednesday in our senior leadership meeting, when Belinda was speaking, that you cut over her before she'd finished the sentence. And the impact of that is that Belinda felt that her point wasn't valid, and it also hinders thinking time. So it's those sort of specifics. So have you kind of worked those in? How do you get that balance where you're being specific but it isn't a policeman's notebook?
I think that's part of the rehearsal beforehand, is to kind of jot down one or two really clear specific examples. But what you need to avoid doing is going in and saying, and when we met 3 months ago, you did this, and at the meeting, whatever, you did this. That's too much, and that then just becomes to that person, it will feel like a personal attack. You are criticising every single meeting I've been in. So if you keep it fairly recent, one or two examples, but as you've just articulated that really specific. We were doing this, you did this, the impact of that was this, and therefore we didn't perform as well, so-and-so's voice wasn't heard, so-and-so felt their point wasn't valid. So I would have just a couple of things that I've jotted down beforehand and go, these are the key points. You've probably got plenty of other examples that you can bring in if you need to, but you don't want to overload it.
So the key thing is to have the one or two specifics, perhaps more recently, to maybe have one or two listed that you've also got. If they say, oh no, but that was just a one-off. You go, okay, I recognise that. And I think it's also about in those moments, if they come back with some, is to recognise their emotion again. I recognise this could be difficult in hearing this information. And I recognise that you might find this challenging to work through. I can give you some more examples if you would like me to, where that's happened, so you can see this isn't a one-off. And remind you again the reason I want to help you is so that you can adjust your behaviour, so you build stronger connections with your teammates, and it helps us. So this, although we're talking about these 4 Ps, it's not like once you've done one, you don't come back to it. Sometimes you have to go back.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah. And if they're getting a bit heightened about it, you go back again, remind them, I'm here to help you. So that it de-escalates that chimp. So you can try and operate as much as you can. You're in their frontal lobe rather than in their emotional centre, in their amygdala. And then the last part is to partner with them. And so that it's not just a case of you telling them what to do. And I often say, the phrase I can use is, what do you think you could do to improve this? What steps do you think you could take to ensure this is better in the future? Which means you're really holding them to account for it, but the kind of sense of control is back with them.
It sits back with them.
Yeah, but how do you engage them in kind of partnering in that conversation? Any top tips there that you've done?
I think when you've asked someone what they think they could do, and it's about what would help and what can I do to support you with this. It's not, oh great, that's a good idea, off you go and do it. Okay, that sounds like the good idea that will help in this situation, and what can I do to help you?
Lovely.
And that might be where somebody says, if you see me start talking over, you might just say, oh, could we just let so and so finish, and then we'll come to you, sort of thing. It's just having that sense that they are going to be trying, but it won't be easy for them to change behaviour, but that you are there to support, and you've got this agreed signal or phrase or something that will be used.
And I like what we've talked about here, which is we hold them first. What could you do? And then we can then offer help.
What can I do to support you or to help you with that?
Because then it gives ownership to them rather than them still being dependent
on you going, this is what I think you should do to, avoid this issue.
Yeah, great. So I guess one last bit around that partnering. How do we, because I wonder if you've come across this one before, where we ask them that question, so what is it you think you could do? And they'll come up with a reason, but you're sitting there thinking, that's limp, and that is not going to really change it. What do you do to I know what I do, but what do you do to still hold them to account for that?
I think it's, and first of all, it would be that, and is there anything else you think?
Great, yeah.
That we could add to this, or anything additional you could do that might resolve it. And if there's no budge on that, and they're like, no, I'm just going to do this, then I think that's the point at which you say, okay, so over the next couple of meetings, I'll keep an eye on that. I'll be looking out for your awareness and your adjustment, and let's meet again in 2 weeks' time, and we'll review how it's going.
Great. I like that one, Anna, because it remains the control in them, and you also means this is an ongoing conversation, not a one-off tick done. It means, and they know that you're going to be aware of this, and then you can use that, the next meetings about asking them to reflect. That idea you came up with, how do you feel that's gone? And if it's not gone so well, then you can say, well, what do you think we could try next? What's the thing you'd like to do? And then hold them to account for that as part of that process. Great. So time is running away with us in terms of here in the Leadership Lounge. So what we've just talked about is, if we're going to have a difficult conversation, if you're thinking about structure, first thing is just to realise the reason. Key thing, really know the purpose of this conversation and one or two keywords that drive it. Then it's about recognising the issues that might be coming on for play in you and in them. It's then about being aware of reactions, again, in yourself, your own emotional reactions, but also theirs, and how you will respond, and planning it. And we can add to that, talk to the cushion beforehand to prepare it. And then raising it with those 4 Ps as part of that, isn't it? Starting with pacifying them, helping them know you're here to help, not here to criticise, being really clear on that purpose, coming back to that key reason again, and what the issue is that you're looking at. Getting to the point, so you've got a couple of key points that you want to raise with them as examples to that, and then partnering with them, asking them what is it they think they could do to do that, and then you offering what they would like support on as part of that process as the second part of it. And I guess what you then do is you draw that together a bit like you've mentioned, okay, so we'll meet again in so many weeks' time, let's see how that's going, and this becomes part of an ongoing development. So just before we look at the top tips for holding a challenging conversation, is there anything else you think our listeners kind of need to know about these challenging conversations? Anything we've missed so far?
I think it's important that we, as leaders, we all remember that there will be times when it doesn't matter how well prepared you are and you can be following through this structure. For some people, their reaction will be such that it just is not going to work. And that's the point at which you have to say, okay, we're going to, this, can see you're upset, angry, distressed, whatever.
Press pause.
This is not helpful for either of us. We're going to end this meeting now, and we will reconvene and come. Because sometimes the only thing you can do is go, right, stop. We stop now because this is going nowhere, and we'll come back to it. And that's okay. If that's what you have to do, that's okay. That's not a failed meeting. That's making a judgment call that's the right one for where that particular conversation has led to.
And it's seeing the conversation as a journey, and it's also recognising they're not in the right headspace, they're operating in their amygdala, their emotional centre, and we need to press pause to allow them to calm, their chimp to de-agitate, and then to pick it up again. And that also gives you a regroup time to think about, what was triggering there, what is it, and what were the really key issues for them.
Which bits that I did actually were effective, and where did it start to unravel a bit, and how do I avoid ending it back at that point again?
And I've also had people then use that time in between the 2 meetings to talk to their coach or to talk to someone else that they trust to just seek a bit of advice on how to handle that next stage. So that's really good. Thank you. So here we come to the end of our session on having these challenging conversations, and so we normally finish with your kind of top tips, maybe up to 3 things that you think people should kind of know and kind of remember as part of this. What for you are those top tips?
I think the key one is to think about the consequences of not having that conversation. And a very wise educator that you knew and worked with alongside me for many years, Roger Fern. I remember when I was dealing with some quite big challenges around performance of staff at school, and he said to me, Anna, the way up here is you risk offending an adult, or if you don't, in a primary school, 30 children in a class, that teacher's got another 10 years till they retire. That's 300 children that are going to get a raw deal. And when you look at it like that, it's obvious what you do. So it's think about and hold on to the consequences of not having the conversation.
Great.
I think the other thing to remember, and it's not always easy, is that usually the anticipation is worse than the doing. Once you're in the room and the person's there and you start that conversation, quite often it's not as bad as you've anticipated. So that's about managing your own chimp and that fear building up, reminding yourself it will be okay. But I think as well, the third one, I'd say it's really important to remember that the other person is a human being too, and they've got feelings and sensitivities and anxieties. And it's about critiquing the work, not the person. Because you want, at the end of the day, you want to have the conversation, you want their performance to improve, their behaviour to change, but you want to leave them intact. It's not about going in and destroying people.
Absolutely. And what you're talking about there is addressing an issue which they might then feel guilty about, but guilt can be addressed. What you
Yeah.
don't want them to feel is actually it's me as a person, and therefore feeling that sense of shame. So that's a great reminder right at the end that when we're having these challenging conversations, it is about having these conversations to lift people up, not to push people or squash them down. And if again we've got that as a key driver from these conversations, that will come across, and you know, we won't go far wrong then, will we, with those conversations. Anna, thank you ever so much for joining me again in the Leadership Lounge. It's been an absolute pleasure as always to kind of chat things through. And thank you everyone for joining us in the Leadership Lounge. We hope looking at challenging conversations has been helpful for you. And if we can be of any further help here at Everyday Lead, then obviously do contact us if you'd like help addressing your challenging conversations and want further help with that. But thank you for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us again next month in the Leadership Lounge.